2 seconds. Oh. All right, hello, and welcome to today's live, where I'm going to be talking about why we can never prepare enough to not make a mistake in our lives. And this is one of the things that I feel like is so important to talk about, because change and doing things differently and changing our lives is really hard. And I think that we live in a world right now where there's lots of talk about hacks and tricks and ways of changing things so that we can make positive changes in our lives and not struggle and not suffer and not deal with the pushback of making those changes. And I do think that, of course, it is absolutely possible that we can figure out ways of making change easier, that we can make change not quite as confronting or challenging as it might be. If we understand ourselves, we can have some tools, we can have some insight, some foresight, some wisdom to help us make changes so that it's not so hard. But at the end of the day, I don't think that we are, as a culture, accepting and acknowledging and validating how hard it is to change our habits and all the little ways that we can sort of sneakily sabotage ourselves in making these changes. And on top of that, the shame and the guilt and the blame that can come when we are watching ourselves sabotage our own change and our own progress and thinking that there's something wrong with us, or that we're weak, or that we're lazy, or that we lack discipline, or whatever it is that we think about ourselves when we're trying to create change, and we keep not doing it, or we keep getting in our own ways, or we keep sabotaging ourselves. And that is what I want to talk about today, because I just feel like, again, if we can understand why change is so hard, and if we can understand why we sabotage ourselves, and if we can start to see our patterns of how we sabotage ourselves as innocent, as something that's trying to help us, something we don't need to necessarily fight against or feel bad about or try to get rid of, but things that we can do to support ourselves in making these changes, and so that we can work with the biology that we have and we can work with the neurochemistry that we have, it makes it a lot easier. So it doesn't necessarily make it easy, but it will make it easier. Now, before I start, I just want to plug my mystery school. So again, if you like my content, if you like any of the things I share here, then you will love the mystery school, because the mystery school is literally your step-by-step guide for getting off of the self-improvement path and onto the self-love path, where you can learn how to problem solve via understanding yourself, right? So we can get off of this merry-go-round of trying to fix ourselves and thinking that we're broken and resisting ourselves and trying to fight against what we are and where we are, but rather we can start to understand why we are where we are. We can understand how we are. We can understand why we have the habits we have. We can understand why we have the desires we have. We can understand why we have the emotions we have. And then I give you tools for learning how to work with that stuff to help you move forward. So it's not about fixing or changing yourself. It's about learning how you work and learning why you work the way that you work, and then gaining tools to help you work with that so that you can move forward. Hello, I'm so happy to see you, Abdul. Okay, so you're here from West Africa. Welcome. Okay, so if you want to join the school, you can always do that. The links are in the description or in my Instagram link tree, or just kind of anywhere on my social media platforms. And it comes with a community, so you have access to me and everyone else who's going through the program, and it's self-paced, so you can start anytime. You can do it as much as you want, as little as you want, and work with it to work with you. Okay, So that's my little plug for that, and now we'll back to the video. All right, so again, one of the main things that we as humans do, all of us, it's not just you if you do this, is that when we know we need to make a change, when we know we want to go somewhere we've never been before, when we want to heal our bodies in a certain way, we want to change the way that we're doing things in our relationships, we want to change how we're working or how we're making money or just how we're living our lives in general. We want to change something about how we're feeling, we want to change something about what we're experiencing. There can be a tendency for us to go into research mode, to go into planning mode, to go into reading everything we can read about it and trying to find all the experts that we can find on it, trying to find all of the people who have done what we want to do or who are in the place we want to be. And we get into this phase where we take that research step so far that it actually stops us from ever making a move. Right? That we get to a place where we genuinely feel and we genuinely think that if I plan enough, if I research enough, if I find mentors and people who know what they're doing and read enough books and listen to enough podcasts and read enough blogs and talk to enough people, one day I'm going to know exactly, okay, so this is what we're looking for. I'm going to know exactly how to get from where I am to where I want to go with one straight line trajectory, right? That I'm going to be able to just find the perfect plan, develop the perfect process that will take me from where I am to where I want to go so that there will be no guesswork along the way. Right? That I will not have to run into any roadblocks, I will not have to run into any problems, I will not have to run into anything that I don't understand, and I will get to where I want to go without ever having to fail at anything or make any mistakes or, like I said, figure anything out on the path because I will have already figured it out. And we can get into this place where we are researching and researching and researching and researching and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting to the point that we never actually take any steps forward. Because there will always be, when we're in that research phase and in that planning phase and in that looking for the mentor phase and all that stuff, there's always going to be something that we're going to realize, okay, but what about this? Okay, but what about this? But what if this happens? But what if that happens? Okay? And then the second thing is that we can do this research phase and really try and get all the answers we can possibly get and work with the experts and find mentors and listen to the podcast and all that stuff. And feel like, okay, I'm ready, right? I'm ready to take the first step. I'm ready to take my next step. I'm going to start doing this. And we go and we take a step or we take a few steps and it doesn't go how we thought it was going to go. Something happens, we have a reaction, it's not as easy as we thought it would be, we don't get the results we were expecting to get, and then we think, okay, see, I didn't know, I didn't prepare enough, I didn't plan enough, I made a mistake. Okay, so that's that first mindset. I made a mistake, something went wrong, I made a mistake, or something went wrong. It didn't go how it was supposed to go. The reaction wasn't what it was supposed to be. The result isn't what it was supposed to be. Or something that I didn't anticipate came up. And so that means I have to go back, start back from square one again, and wait till I find the perfect path to go forward again. And this is one of the ways that we stop ourselves from ever moving forward. We are trying to protect ourselves from all pain. We are trying to protect ourselves from all unknown. We are trying to protect ourselves from having to figure it out as we go. By thinking if I can just fully prepare and get all of my eggs in a row before I go, there will be no pain on the path. Okay? So we have to first recognize the innocence in that. When we catch ourselves in places and spaces where we know we are not moving forward in the ways that we could, where we know that we are in a perpetual state of research and thinking that we can find this perfect way forward, what's really happening is our brains and our bodies are saying, I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to have to struggle. I don't want to have to figure it out as I go. Right? And usually the deeper thing that's going on there is that we don't believe we can. We don't believe that we have what it takes to figure it out as we go. We don't believe that we have the strength to figure it out as we go. And again, we've talked about this a lot on this channel, but our culture has trained most of us to believe that things are supposed to, that any path forward is supposed to go well if we're doing it right. That the way that we measure success is by getting the outcomes we were expecting to get, by taking the steps we were taking, and that anything that happens that isn't that is a failure. And even deeper than that then means that we failed and we did something wrong and we are bad and we are shameful and that's embarrassing. So there's all these layers of the actual pain of making a mistake or not getting the results that we wanted. And another thing I want to add with that is, again, a lot of the time when we are trying to change our lives, it's because what we're already in is causing us pain on some level. It's because where we're at right now doesn't feel good. We're exhausted, we're tired, we're hurting, we're confused, we're scared, we're lost. And so to think that we're going to have to do things to move ourselves forward that are also going to be painful, that are also going to be not what we thought they were going to be, that we're going to have to put in effort that doesn't get us the results that we want, there's going to be massive resistance to that. And for good reason. Again, we're already in pain, we're already tired, we're already lost, we're already confused. We're wanting to change because what we're in doesn't feel good. And then to think again, to accept again, that moving forward is going to mean doing things that don't get us the results that we want. We are going to have to make mistakes. We are going to have to do things that don't lead us to the bliss we thought they were going to lead us to, and that actually sometimes lead us into even more pain. There's going to be massive resistance to that just because it doesn't feel good, right? It doesn't feel good. That's not what we want. We don't want to hear you're in pain, you're in a place that you don't want to be, and in order to get to somewhere else, you're going to have to take a bunch of steps that don't work how you thought they were going to work, that don't give you the results that you were wanting to get. You're going to have to struggle. Okay, so that's the first thing. That's hard. That's really hard to understand. That's really hard to embrace. That's really hard to accept. That in order to get out of where I am, there is no perfect path forward. And I'm going to have to go from pain that I'm familiar with to pain that I'm unfamiliar with. All right? So I heard this quote. And people have said, like, this is something that I think a lot of us have heard. That our nervous systems and our brains and our bodies are always going to choose the pain we know. It's always going to choose the pain we are familiar with versus choosing anything different, even if that thing, the different thing, could be the best thing ever. Right? The unfamiliar heaven. Our bodies will always want to go for the pain we already know. So that's something we're going to talk about in just a second, but I just want to say, right? So the pain of change equaling unfamiliar pain, when we're already in familiar pain, we're always going to want to choose familiar pain. Always. And I think that can make sense, right? So we want to plan, we want to research, we want to do whatever, thinking that if I'm going to change, if I'm going to do something different, it had better work out the first time. It had better give me pleasure and answers and something that is better than what I have right now as soon as I do it. Otherwise, I'm just going and experiencing pain that I don't already know how to handle. That's what's going on in our bodies, right? I know how to do this pain. I know how to predict this pain. It may suck, I may not like it, but if the alternative is I have to do something different and then also experience new and different pain that I don't even know how to handle, we're gonna resist that. So that's where the whole planning to try to make it perfect so that the steps that we take are a guarantee to make us feel better. That's the first reason we're gonna do that. So that makes perfect sense, right? I think we can all have compassion for ourselves. I would rather be in the pain that I know than be in pain that I don't know. I would rather not take effort and be in pain than make effort and have it not work out and equal pain. I'm already exhausted, I'm already tired, I'm already overwhelmed, I already don't like where I am. And you're telling me that I'm going to have to take steps that are going to lead to pain and also be uncomfortable and unfamiliar, right? Like, we can see why we wouldn't want to do that. Okay, so that's step one. Second thing is, again, a lot of us don't have faith in ourselves that we can figure it out. So many of us have been raised in a culture where we were not empowered that learning is possible. We were not empowered that learning along the way was possible. We all learned, especially through the school system, that knowledge and information comes from someone telling us what to do, comes from a book, comes from a person or some resource that's gonna give us the answers before we take the test. So that by the time we take this test, we already know the answers. That is how school trained us that learning is supposed to work. Okay, so now if we understand that, and then we compare and contrast to what real learning in real life is actually like, where most of the time, when we're in our adult life, we, again, can learn from experts, we can get information, we can research, we can do all these things that can help us avoid a lot of pain and a lot of mistakes and a lot of things we don't have to go through because we can benefit from the knowledge of the people who came before us. Yes? But we also have to understand that we and our lives are always going to be unique on some level. There's never going to come a time where someone is going to be able to tell you exactly what is going to happen to you when you take this step or that step, or exactly what steps you need to take in order to get from where you are to where you want to go, because life is always going to throw something at us that we didn't expect. There's always going to be an unknown factor. There's always going to be something that comes up that we didn't expect. And in order to really make change in this life, in order to learn, we often have to learn from reality itself. We have to learn from our lived experience. And what that means is we have to go forward before we know the answer. We're only going to get the answers of how do we work through this and what do we need to do and what's the path forward by walking it and making mistakes and learning from our experience. Okay? And again, our culture has indoctrinated us that that means that we're fucking up, that means that we're doing something wrong, that if we're not on a straight line trajectory from where we are to where we want to go, we're doing something wrong. We're failing. Because there should be a way to know everything before we go. Yes? Because again, that is how we were all trained, that learning happens. Someone tells you all the answers, then you take the test. Someone gives you all the information, then you take the test. The test is only ever after you've gathered all the information. So is it any wonder that a lot of us have this instinct to try to gather all the information before we go. Because we were taught, again, that that's how learning works, that that's how progress happens. Someone tells you all the answers, then you take the test. Yes? But in real reality, it barely ever works like that. In real reality, we usually, like I say, have to learn from our experience. We have to take the steps. We have to learn on the job, in the field, because, again, there's no way of predicting our entire lives. So again, not to get into black and white thinking, there are definitely things where we can get tools from other people, where we can get information from other people. We're not going in completely blind, right? Doing no research, that's not what I'm talking about. We don't want to be in black and white thinking. We just want to understand that our life is going to be unique. Our journey is going to be unique. And no matter how much we research, there is never going to come a time where we have complete knowledge and complete awareness before we go. Which means we are going to have to learn from reality. Which means we are going to have to face things we have never faced before. We are going to have to do things we have never done before. We are going to have to experience things we have never experienced before. Which means we're going to fall on our face sometimes. We're not going to know what the answer is. We're going to face a block and have no idea how to get around it because we've never faced it before. And the only way to learn how to get around it is to interact with it, is to fail, is to try something, see that that doesn't work. Try something else, see what sort of worked about it, what didn't work about it, make another adjustment. Try something else, try something else, try something else until we figure it out in real time. And like I said, a lot of us don't believe that we can do that. We were never taught how to do that. That's what the mystery school is for. That's what I give you, these tools of how do we figure things out as we go. This is the second reason why we all just want to plan and plan and plan and research and research and research and try to get all the answers before we go. Because again, we were taught that that's how learning is supposed to be. We don't want to have to face the reality of figuring it out on the path because no one taught us that that was possible. Okay? And then that third reason of judgment, of society judging us, our friends, our family, everyone around us. When we're going for something different, when we're trying to change, the crabs in the bucket situation is very, very real. People are going to be afraid for you. People are going to be afraid for themselves. People are going to not want you to do this. Because again, remember, when we change, even when the changes that we're making don't necessarily have a direct impact on anyone around us, like we're not asking anyone else to do what we're doing. We're not really even necessarily changing in a way that's going to affect them. We are still destabilizing everyone's reality and everyone's familiar. This is how we do things. This is how we interact. I know where to put you. I know what you're like. I know what you're going to talk about. I know what you're going to complain about. I know how you're going to be. We are putting all of that up for question. And people are going to be like, no, don't do that. Don't go there. Don't make a mistake. Oh, you fucked up. See, there's no point. We should all just keep doing what we're doing. And again, a lot of that is people's instinct of resistance to change because of that biology that says our deep biology was programmed that change is threat. Right? And we really need to understand this. And I'm going to talk about it again as soon as I'm done this little thing. But that we all have a biological imperative that is forcing us to seek the same stability, doing the same things over and over and over again. Because that's what our evolutionary biology believes. And right, believes is not the right word, but has learned over time evolutionarily is the safest thing. the environment we knew how to predict was always the best way to survive. In terms of threat level, change for all of human history was the thing that took us out. So our brains and our bodies are the ancestors, right? Our ancestors were the beings, the humans, that figured out stability, that resisted change, because that's how they survived. The ones that could figure out and predict and then have that same life over and over and over again were the ones that passed down their genes. So we inherited that in our bodies and in our mental capacity and in our way of being. That same equals safe, and change equals threat. Yeah? So when we start to make changes and when we start to do different things, not only are we facing the obstacle of that journey on its own, we're also facing that obstacle in terms of the people around us who are going to have that instinct to push back against us, to say, don't change, don't do stuff, who are going to judge us, who are going to fear for us, who are going to think we're doing something wrong, especially, again, when our journey involves having to make mistakes and not knowing and falling down and having to figure it out as we go. They're going to see us struggle. They're going to see us flounder. They're going to see us not know. And they're going to be like, see, this was a huge mistake. Stop it. Come back. Go back. Do what you've always done. Do what everyone else is doing. Don't do this. You are messing this up for me. You're changing how I have, like, my stability, my foundation, because you're now a different thing. You see what I'm saying here? By you changing, means that you no longer are something safe and familiar to them. Just by you changing, even if that change literally has no impact on their life. The fact that you now became something in their field that isn't the same and predictable means you are a threat now. On some level, they are going to experience you as a threat. So there's going to be antagonism. And then again, sometimes people, right, like they want to give advice, they want to help, they don't want you to be in pain, they don't want you to struggle, they fear for you, so they push back against your change. And then there's just going to be that judgment and that harshness of our culture and our society that says, unless what you do is perfect, unless the steps you take are so much better than what you're doing right now, you're failing. It's stupid. Don't do it. See, you're so much worse than us. Just do what we're doing, right? And again, especially if the changes that you're trying to make are changes to a routine and a way of life that you share with other people, right? Everyone drinks, and then you decide you're going to stop drinking, and then you get sick because of the detox. They're all going to be like, see, drinking is better. Look what you're doing. Why would you change? Even if all of them are feeling kind of shitty in the ways that they're living, everyone wants to go for the familiar hell versus the unfamiliar heaven, and especially versus the unfamiliar hell, right? And they are going to push back against you changing because that might mean that they have to change, or that there is a different or better way, and they're telling themselves that there isn't. That's a huge thing in our culture, is people using one another as the example of, see, we're all doing it this way. And yeah, we can see that it's not the best thing. Like, all of us can see that maybe on some level we're not happy, we're not healthy, we're not whatever. But we're all validating each other by everyone participating and proving to each other that anything else would be worse. This is part of what keeps us doing the same things over and over again, is we convince ourselves that even if what we're doing isn't the best, it's not the greatest, there's pain, there's struggle, there's suffering on some level, we can look at anyone doing something different. And we want to zero in on the pain, on how that's bad, on how that's wrong, so we can justify not changing. Yeah? We want to say, okay, yeah, our thing might not be amazing, but it's better than that. So then when we start to change, everyone around us, in order to justify themselves not changing, is going to be zeroing in on any little flaw or any little struggle or any little something not going as perfectly good for you as it could go, as a way of being like, see, you're crazy. Right? At least what we're doing works. You doing your change, see, it was worse. There is no other way. Stop challenging our paradigm that this is the best way. And they do that by being hypercritical and hyper nitpicky of anything that isn't perfectly perfect, that anyone who's trying to change is experiencing, right? Using that as their reason to not change. So they want you to fail on some level. They want it to be bad for you. They want to point out all the mistakes, because that justifies for them that they don't need to change and they don't need to do what you're doing. You see? So is it any wonder, that change, which is already hard, becomes infinitely harder when we add all these factors in of how we're trained and how we're conditioned and what's going on in culture and society? That we are going to resist change. We are going to resist going forward. We are going to feel like we did something wrong and something went wrong when we go forward and the steps we take don't work out the way we thought they should. That when we go forward and we make a mistake, or things are hard, or things are challenging, or we run into a challenge we didn't expect, the instinct is going to be, go back, research more, don't do it. Something went wrong. Because it's supposed to be that I go from my pain that I'm in to the pleasure that I want to be in one straight line. But that is not reality. Okay? So again, let's just quickly, one more time, talk about the idea that, so number one, we have to understand, no matter what we're doing right now, and no matter how painful what we're in right now is, I want everyone to have super deep compassion for themselves. That changing, even from what some of the most painful, horrible, toxic things, is hard, because our bodies and our brains still believe the best way to survive and the best way to be secure is to do what we've always done. Okay, so all of us, on some level, have coping mechanisms, have ways of interacting with our significant others, with our coworkers, with our family, with our friends. All of us have ways that we behave with our bodies, with our work, with our money, with our mental health, that on the surface look self-sabotaging. On the surface look like we're just harming ourselves. On the surface look like we're just not trying. And what we always have to recognize in our bad habits, and I'm putting bad habits in air quotes, with our things that we think, this is what's causing my pain, this is my bad way of being, this is the thing that's wrong with me that I need to fix. We always want to look first for where that thing is helping us survive the only way we know how to survive. We want to look for where we learned to engage in that habit and how it's helping us, right? So a lot of us are going to be like, right, I'm codependent and I'm constantly people pleasing, and that's just a bad thing about me. And if I could just stop people pleasing, everything would be great. Because we're not looking at where did we learn that people pleasing was the safest way to behave. Where did we learn that not people pleasing got us rejection, got us shame, got us outcasted, and that was worse than betraying ourselves and being codependent and doing what people want us to do and then ending up being resentful or, betraying ourselves and all that stuff. We always have to understand that we're doing what we're doing, even if it's totally painful. We're doing it because the alternative, somewhere along the line, we learned that the alternative was worse. Somewhere along the line, we experienced that the alternative was worse. And again, if we can also understand that a lot of the habits that we have in our adulthood were not developed in our adulthood. They were developed in our childhood. In our childhood, where we were living in a completely different reality than the reality we're living in our adulthood. I say this in almost every video, and this is like a main theme in the mystery school because we forget this. We are all living as a product of the temporary codependent reality that we were born into as children. When we were children, we did not have autonomy. We did not have logic. We did not have the capacity to understand our own needs and understand our own wants and to be autonomous and to get our own needs met and all that stuff. We were fully and completely dependent upon our caregivers to understand us, to empath our needs, and to meet our needs. To be rejected by our caregivers, from our perspective as children, was to be completely unsafe and to die. To be accepted by our caregivers was to be safe, because then they were going to love us, then they were going to empath us, and they were going to give us everything we wanted and everything we needed, and they were going to protect us from all pain. That was our perception. Okay, that wasn't necessarily true reality, but that's how we perceived reality. And that's all that matters. Because that's what was getting programmed into our body as being what reality was. So we all learned on some level that to live up to the expectation of caregivers and whatever culture they taught us was the safest way to survive. So then any part of ourselves that got us rejected, we then developed an existential relationship with that part of ourselves. That was now a threat to us, because if that part gets us rejected, it's separating us from our source of all things. So a lot of us walk around in our adulthoods codependent and people-pleasing. And we think, what's wrong with me that I'm like that? Nothing. That was the reality we were all trained to believe was reality for the first 15 years of our lives. Getting what we wanted and getting what we needed, from our perspective, came through the middleman of our caregivers and the people around us, approving of us, and then giving it to us. That is how childhood was. Learning our autonomy and learning that we can meet our own needs and learning that we don't have to be approved of in order to get what we want and what we need. Most of us didn't really even learn that in our bodies. We just learned to expand our view of who we needed to impress and who we needed to love us, thinking if we just live up to expectation, and we're not thinking this, this is what our bodies believe. Living up to expectation equals people understanding me, equals people giving me what I want and taking away what I need. We never transitioned into adulthood. Most of us didn't make the full transition into adulthood, where we said, first of all, caregivers are not omnipresent, omnipotent gods who have access to all things. They weren't, right? So again, we believed that everything that we experienced was because of our behavior. Our behavior being the thing that was either getting us loved or getting us rejected. And that was the reason caregivers were either giving us what we wanted or not giving us what we didn't need, or saving us or not saving us or whatever. We didn't have the perception to understand that caregivers weren't perfect and couldn't give us everything we wanted and needed, that they didn't know everything, that they weren't omnipresent and omnipotent, that not everything that they did was because of us on some level or because of our behavior. We weren't perceiving any of that. We just learned caregivers have access to everything. The only reason they give us what we want and give us what we need is because they love and approve of us. And the only reason that they wouldn't is because they're upset with us on some level. We did something wrong. So what do I need to change about myself to become more approvable? And then they will start to understand me and understand my needs. And then we do that in all of our relationships, right? We expect our partners to understand what we want and understand what we need and understand what's going to make us happy. And we think, if I just please you, if I just please you enough, if I just avoid your anger and do all of these things, I'm going to be safe with you. And then you're going to meet my needs. You're going to take my pain away and you're going to give me pleasure. And that's how we behave with society at large. When we're in pain and we're struggling, we don't think, what caused that pain? Am I sick? Am I hungry? Blah, blah. Our instinct is to go into, what did I just do wrong? What do I need to fix about myself? Because that wiring, that pain comes from being rejected, is so deep in us that we don't even recognize that it's a program that's not real. And then we can find all the ways that we were rejected. And then we try to make ourselves thinner, or we try to make ourselves prettier, or we try to make ourselves whatever. And we're not even really addressing why. What is the actual pain? What do you actually want? If you were to become the most beautiful person on the planet, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to be delivered from all of my pain. Well, where is your pain coming from? Being rejected? Probably not. It probably isn't. There's probably a whole bunch of other things going on in your life. Needs that are not being met. Ways of expressing yourself that you're not getting to express. Things you don't understand about yourself yet that have nothing to do with anyone approving or disapproving of you. But this is that self-help, self-improvement spiral that we never get out of, most of us. Because we continue to perceive life the way we perceived it as children. Yeah? And that's what keeps us stuck in our patterns of doing what we've always done, that we learned in our childhoods, that we then carry with us into our adulthood. So again, remember, a lot of the things that we do in our adulthood are negative, self-sabotaging, whatever behaviors, are coping mechanisms we learned and then have been evolving since childhood. We're just trying to do what we need to do to try to make ourselves fit in, to try to make ourselves not be the things that get us rejected, to try to make ourselves more approvable by the standards that we were trained to follow in our childhoods. And then we're continuing to morph and change our habits to become more and more different things without even realizing why we're doing it anymore. So again, we think, if I just stopped people pleasing, I'd be happy. But you wouldn't. Because if you stopped people pleasing, the people around you would get upset with you. They would reject the real you. They would stop, the dynamic that you have. And then you now have to figure out, what am I going to do instead? How do I meet my own needs? How do I communicate in a different way? You'd stop people pleasing and you'd be in more pain for a little while. You see? Because the people pleasing is to just try to keep yourself safe, in the hopes that if I just am pleasing enough, everyone will love me and accept me and then meet my needs. And probably to a degree that's working a little bit. So if we were to take that away, now you have to be responsible for your needs. You have to be responsible for communicating your needs. So instead of going to your partner and cooking them dinner and trying to make it so that they love you, so that maybe later they'll snuggle you, you have to say, I need some physical connection. Would you give that to me? Right? You have to start to become aware of your actual needs and then start to learn how to communicate them with people who are not used to you communicating, and might say no, and they might reject you. And then you not being pleasing to them means they might reject you. Do you see what I'm saying? So to just stop being people pleasing isn't going to make you happy right away. It's going to present a whole new bunch of challenges, and we have to understand that the people pleasing is helping us. So to change, again, to change anything, to change any habit, We first want to understand how the habits we have right now are helping us, where we developed them, the needs they're getting met, what they're rooted in, and what's actually going to happen when we start to change these things. It's not going to be perfect bliss, right? It's all of the benefits that we're getting from these habits will start to go away. And then we're going to be in unfamiliar territory, which is something our bodies and our brains do not want to be in. We're going to have to learn new things on the job, learn new things about ourselves as we discover them via taking our coping mechanisms away, and then having to figure out how to get these needs met in new and different ways when we didn't even know that those were needs we had. And then trying to figure it out within a context of social conditioning where everyone else is doing what we've always done. So now we're changing, and the people around us might not be changing. So then for us to change and to try to get our needs met in new and different ways means changing the interactions we're having with other people. And they might not be cooperative. They might not be supportive. They might be antagonistic. And then having to deal with that. It's uncomfortable. So again, is it any wonder that we search for the perfect thing? And we think, if I just find the perfect path, I can avoid all this. Right? We can have compassion for ourselves. That we sabotage our own change. That we avoid going forward. Especially when going forward involves the unknown, which is pretty much every time. We can understand why we want to plan everything. And why most of us never make significant changes in our lives. Because in order to make significant change, we are going to have to go through periods of time where life gets worse before it gets better. And that is something that I think, again, we don't talk about enough. We look at people's before and afters, and we see the journey, and we see how someone has transformed their lives, and they make it in that little reel or Instagram video or whatever. And it's like, right, I was here, I changed my thing, and now I'm here. And they might show little clips of them crying and things like this. But it doesn't effectively communicate, I don't think, how messy change is. How much we are going to have to take steps that don't work. How much we are going to have to do things we really thought were going to get us X result, and we get Y, and we have no idea why we got Y. And then we have to kind of go back and retrace our steps and figure it out. Just how deeply unfamiliar territory does not feel good. I was working with a client, and one of the things that they were saying was why can't I get myself to do these new habits? Even when the new habit feels good. Right? I have my old habit, I know why I'm doing it. So again, understanding that when we want to change, the first thing we really want to understand, the first thing we really want to do is to understand, at least to a degree, the positive outcomes of the things we're currently doing. So long as we still think we have bad habits just to sabotage ourselves, or there's just some inner saboteur or some bad part of us that's just doing this thing for no reason, we're never going to be able to change. Because a huge part of being able to change is realizing the positive outcome of whatever habits we have right now, how these habits are meeting our needs, how they're keeping us safe, how they were what we needed to do in a certain period of time in our life, where if we weren't that way, the alternative would have been worse. Even if it's, technically healthier to be a certain different way, in the time, in the context, it wouldn't have been. And we then have to just start to develop new ways of getting those same needs met, new ways of providing that same level of safety, new ways of getting ourselves the positive out of whatever thing we're trying to change before our bodies and our brains are ever going to let go of what we have right now. Okay? If you get nothing out of this video, I hope you take this. There's nothing that you're doing that doesn't have a good reason. No matter how painful or self-destructive or whatever it is, you learned somewhere along the way that that's the best way to be, that everything else would have been worse, and it's getting a need met on some level. There is no thing that you're doing that's just purely harmful and for no good reason. That doesn't exist. That's why I think most self-improvement from step one never works. Because we're then fighting against something that our body is like, I need this to survive. We try and take things away from ourselves without understanding why we're doing it and how it's helping us. And all that happens is we take it away from ourselves and life gets worse. Because now all of a sudden, this is my favorite metaphor for this. It's like when we don't understand that we need vitamin C. And society has outlawed all vitamin C rich foods. So all oranges get thrown into the garbage. And therefore, in the garbage, they develop mold and they develop bacteria and all of this stuff. And then some of us are going through the garbage and eating the oranges. Because without vitamin C, we get scurvy. Our gums bleed, our wounds heal slowly, we have low energy, we feel like shit. So then we're eating these oranges out of the garbage. And we're getting sick from doing it, right? They give us a stomach ache. We get some bacteria. We think, oh, what's wrong with me that I can't stop eating these oranges? We think if I could just stop eating these oranges, this bad habit, this disgusting habit, everything in my life would be better. I could stop sneaking around, I could stop going through the garbage, I could stop getting sick, it would be amazing. But what actually happens when you stop eating the garbage oranges is you get all the symptoms of scurvy. It doesn't make you feel better. You feel worse. And you think, what's wrong with me that when I take away my coping mechanism, life gets worse, not better? Well, yeah, because your coping mechanism is helping you meet a need. So then when you start to say, okay, what is good about this? There must be something in these oranges that is healthy for me. And maybe if I just didn't eat them out of the garbage, maybe if I found a source where they weren't throwing the oranges into the garbage, I could eat clean oranges, and then that takes away my scurvy, and also I don't get the negative side effects of eating something out of the garbage. He said, yes, I'm going through this right now over quitting smoking. So again, we do have to understand, right, that there's a biological addiction that goes on with that. And really looking at what does the smoking do for me? Aside from just smoking, right? Like aside from the nicotine. How does it comfort me? How does it help me relax? How does it help me do all of these things that I have no other way of making myself feel as good as I feel with a cigarette? Because that's what's really going on. We are doing everything that we're doing because it gives us pleasure on some level, or because on some level we learned to do anything else would make us unsafe. So sometimes, again, it's not necessarily even that the habit brings us pleasure, but it's that we learned that if I don't do this, I'm going to be antagonized. And if I'm antagonized, I won't be okay. So then we have to slowly start to learn, again, new habits that get us the same results, the same benefits as the thing we're doing now. And we use both in tandem. We don't take away the old thing until the new thing proves itself to work. So that's the thing. That's the first thing. Remember, the body will always go for what's familiar over what's unfamiliar, even if what is unfamiliar is better than what's familiar. We have to make the new thing familiar before we're going to choose it. This is why we're going to use our coping mechanism and the negative thing and the new thing at the same time, over and over and over again, until the body gets used to the new thing. And then it will start to prefer the new thing, and we don't have to fight the old habit. Because the new habit is providing the same benefits with less pain, and it's become familiar. That's when we will go for it. Okay? And then the second thing is when the habit is just trying to protect us from the negative consequences of not doing that thing, we often have to very, very slowly show ourselves that we can face these circumstances of challenge, and that we can be okay when people reject us, and we can be okay when people don't understand us, and we can do it anyways. That's a slow progress. Learning how to change and do things differently while we're being rejected and judged is one of the hardest things any human is ever going to do. Because that's our first survival program. Do whatever you need to do to fit in. Because not fitting in means not being safe. Our bodies are going to fight everything that we could possibly do that might get us rejected. Because it reads that as being the biggest number one threat to our survival. So even if what we're doing right now to be approved of is killing us, our body isn't going to want to stop doing it if it equals people not liking us. Because it still thinks it's better to do this thing that's killing me and be approved of than to do something healthy for me and be rejected. Teaching our bodies that being rejected doesn't equal death is hard. Again, this is why my mystery school is 3 years. Learning how to do what's actually good for you when it doesn't align with what you were taught you had to do and be in order to be loved is the hardest thing we will ever do as humans. Our bodies and our brains are going to fight it tooth and nail on every level. Because again, it's trying to keep us safe by keeping us the same. It's trying to keep us safe by saying, okay, if I'm going to change, I'm going to change only when I have everything perfectly figured out so that there will be no pain and no rejection. And no mistake, because that will equal rejection. Where I will be able to just present to everyone this new perfect thing that I'm doing. And even if we can then present to everyone this new perfect thing that we're doing, people might still reject us. People might still be like, oh, you did that new and different thing and I don't like it. That makes me feel insecure. That makes me feel... And then you get rejected, you're going to feel like you're going to die. Even if your results are amazing. You have only results that prove that what you're doing is better than what you were doing before. You're going to think, oh my God, I'm going to die. They're right. They must be right. I must be killing myself. I must be totally out to lunch. Because again, that body, the nervous system is still saying, do what you've always done. Be the same. Be approvable. That's what keeps us safe. That's what keeps us alive. Okay, so when we can start to understand that and we can start to witness that pattern in ourselves, we again can start to step into the adult perspective of like, okay, they're rejecting me. They don't... But what are the real results I'm getting in real reality? Yeah, they're rejecting me, and yeah, they don't like me. But am I still okay? Am I maybe even arguably better than I used to be? Or, okay, they're rejecting me, and I'm making a mistake, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know what I'm doing. But am I still okay? Right? Really coming into real reality of like, okay, they can be mad at me all they want, but what's the actual outcome? Am I actually going to be okay? Can I go forward anyways? Can I do this anyways? Working with our nervous system on that level is really hard. But again, learning that we can be okay even when we're being rejected is one of the most important things we will ever do for ourselves, to be able to see what real reality is. To actually be able to assess the outcome of our actions, we have to sometimes separate it from how it's making other people perceive us. And that's hard work. To be like, okay, did this feel bad because it was actually bad results? Or did it feel bad because people didn't like it? Or I even just perceived that people wouldn't like it. You can see why now, right? We cling to the planning phase to try to avoid going forward. Because going forward is unfamiliar. And the body and the brain will always go for the familiar hell than the unfamiliar heaven. And again, like I say, most of the time when we're making change, the first few steps out of where we are is more pain and more confusing and not knowing and not having the answers. And it going not how we thought it was going to go, and having to learn from it and being rejected. It's very hard. This is why most people never change, right? We just keep doing the same things we've always done. Because to learn these skills, to be able to do this, is really challenging. So hopefully this video is some validation for you that there's nothing wrong with you if you're resistant to change, and change is hard. That's normal. Learning these skills of how to change is really challenging. That's what the Mystery School is for. There's lots of other people teaching this, right? I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one saying these things. But learning how to be on our own side so that we can get out of that paradigm that says if I'm being rejected, I'm going to die, and therefore we can start to assess real reality. That's the greatest tool, greatest gift we'll ever give ourselves. Learning how to be your own safe place is the first step. That's why compassion and curiosity for yourself is the very first step to all of this. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with you if you resist change. There's nothing wrong with you if you really fear being rejected. There's nothing wrong with you if you want to find the perfect path. It doesn't exist. You're going to have to face pain. But there's nothing wrong with you that you seek those things. Okay? Getting on your own side, learning how to learn from real reality, learning that things are just going to be hard sometimes, and being on your own side, that is how we do it. Okay? Okay. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you when I see you.